Delegate Ann Healey. I've been representing District 22 since 1991. And I'm very proud to be here with you. I'm so proud to represent this particular district because you are all so wonderful. And I could go on a long time about that, but I have a job to do first. This is one of those jobs that you cannot do perfectly. I'm going to be calling out the names of all the elected officials in the room who have signed up. And there may be others who didn't sign in, and I will certainly give you all an opportunity to stand and be recognized. But let me start with the beginning here. We have Prince George's County State's Attorney Aisha Braithwaite. We have a representative from the office of Senator Chris Van Hollen. That's Eve Schuman. And we have Senator Arthur Ellis was here earlier and had to leave, as did Senator Ron Young. We have the Senator President Pro Tem, who was from Prince George's County, Melanie Griffith, and she was here earlier too. Well, you've met Senate President Bill Ferguson, and now we have Delegate Mary Lehman, District 21, neighboring district, and Delegate Ann Kaiser, the chair of the Ways and Means Committee. And now I'm going to, all the elected officials, municipal officials, the mayor, the new mayor of Greenbelt, Colin Bird, the Mayor Pro Tem and former Mayor, Emmett Jordan, another former Mayor, Jay Davis, welcome, and Councilmember Lita Mack. From New Carrollton, we have Stephen John, Councilman Lincoln Lashley, and Councilman Roy Peterson. From Riverdale Park, we have Mayor Alan Thompson, and from the Prince George's County Council, we have Danielle Galeros, who represents a large part of District 22. Council member, former delegate, Jolene Ivey, who represents District 5, which is also part of District 22, and Todd Turner, Council President, Prince George's County President, who also represents part of District 22. We have Prince George's County School Board member, Pamela Boozer-Strother. And we have Central Committee and Civic Association leader, Stephanie Hicks. Also here. And we also have a special guest tonight, the sitting judges of Prince George's County. There's a whole list of them here. Save them so that they can all be recognized. Judge Byron S. Bariano, Judge Wytonia Curry, Judge Sharon Kelsey, Judge Jared McCarthy, and Judge Kathy Surratt. And are there any other? Oh, so I see Senator Malcolm Augustine from Prince George's County, and Senator Obie Patterson from Prince George's County. All right. Any other elected officials that I may have missed?
Alonzo.
Not yet. He's got a special place in the program. He's going to get a special introduction. I'm going to speak a few minutes first. And then I'll introduce Alonzo because he's doing a great job, and I have some special things to say about him in a minute. But first I wanted to talk a little bit about all the things that are happening right now. This is a year of sea change. The chemistry of the General Assembly has changed dramatically since the end of the last session. And so we have new presiding officers in both houses. For the very first time ever in the history of the state of Maryland, which goes back more than 300 years, we have a Speaker of the House who is an African American woman. Delegate Adrian Jones is breaking new ground every day. New things are happening everywhere. And one of the things that's happening is a realignment of leadership. Young people are moving up quickly. We do have, my colleague here wanted to make sure everybody knows, one of the things that Speaker Jones has done for the women legislators is to make sure that we have adequate sanitary facilities. She's added 2 additional ladies' rooms. Well, there's 1 additional ladies' room and 1 that's unisex. So, but that's doubled what we had available to us. So it's a wonderful thing, and these little nitty-gritty things matter, but the big things matter too. The big sweeping things. So we're here honoring Dr. King and Dr. King's legacy, and we like to celebrate, but we also have to remember that his life ended with an assassination, and that we celebrate the successes that he created for the next generation and the next generation. He died in 1968. That was the year I graduated from high school. He was 39 years old. So anybody who's more than 39 years old, what have you been doing? It's amazing, really, how he changed the world. But it was not without sacrifice. The stories have been told today, but that sacrifice is something that is our legacy, and we need to carry it as the precious thing it is and not let it slip away. And we are seeing all the time now how vigilance, eternal vigilance, is the price of freedom still. We need not to let these things slip away. Nothing is guaranteed. We have to stand up for it all the time. And in this district, in this community that we represent, that is happening every day. Just by the way people live their lives, how they look out for each other, how we take pride in our diversity. We're not seeking, people who live in our district didn't move here because they wanted to be segregated. That didn't happen. And people who live here stay because this is the kind of community we want to have. We have to model and do the work ourselves. And we hope that other people will see what we're doing and imitate it. But even if they don't, that's not going to stop us from doing what we know is right. I do want to talk now about some of the leadership changes that have happened in the House of Delegates, because one of them is our Alonzo Washington, who is now the vice chair of the Ways and Means Committee, after serving after serving 3 years on the Kerwin Commission. He and Senator Pinsky have become the experts that all of us in the legislature and all of us in the state really are looking to explain to us how we get from here to there and what we have to do. And we are following, they are the leaders on this issue, and this is the issue of the year, of this 4-year term, of this generation. Opportunity for every child to have the best quality education, regardless of their zip code, regardless of how well off their parents are, or whether their parents or they speak English as a first language, whatever their needs, we have to be sure that they have every opportunity to succeed to the best of their ability and to help them to grow so that we can rely on them as we get older. You know, I just said this to the other day. I was at church, somebody asked me about the governor's plan to give senior citizens this big tax break. I said, okay, that's $1 billion we don't have, and we need to spend the money on our children so that they get a good education so that they can take care of us in our old age. Because we're not going to be around to do that. And so we want them to have that kind of education where they can be successful and also have the heart to care for their whole community. I want to bring Alonzo up now. He's not quite 39, so he has a couple years to really do something. But he really is doing stuff all the time, and he has accomplished an enormous amount in his young life. And we're looking forward to him. I'm very happy with him being the Vice Chair of Ways and Means because that's a job I had. A long time ago, I was the Vice Chair of that committee for 10 years. And I know it's a tough job. You're right in the center of everything this year. Oh, and by the way, he's also chair of the subcommittee on the Ways and Means Committee, the subcommittee on education. So we know we have the leaders in place that represent he's the one to call about this stuff. And I would like to turn the microphone over to him now so that he can tell you a little bit more.
Thank you, Delegate Healey. Give it up for Delegate Healey, please. Delegate Healey, thank you for your service to our community for over these many years. Not only that your service in Hyattsville as a city councilwoman, but as a state delegate here and your leadership here. So we really appreciate it. Another round of applause for Delegate Healey. This mic, is it working? Can you guys hear me? All right, cool. I felt like I'm not hearing myself right now. So it's good to see everybody today. I want to just welcome you all here. I'm really happy to have you all here in Annapolis with us. Let me turn my sheet because I'm on the wrong page right now. But let me just open it up by saying that I know many of you know my former legislative aide, Martin McGowan. Anybody know that guy? Yeah, he did a really good job for me, but unfortunately in September, he left our office. So he's moved on to work for us in our community at the Hyattsville CDC. We're doing great economic and community development work there, but I wanted to introduce you to the person who's now going to be working for you in my office. And I say for you because he doesn't really work for me, he works for you, answering your calls and getting your issues resolved. And it's an extremely important position for me. And so it didn't take much time for me to hire this young man because he was an intern of mine when he was in high school at Roosevelt High School. And when I knocked on his mom's door, his mom asked me if he can intern with us. And I said, absolutely. And years later, he graduated from Utah University. And now he's here working in office. He lives in University Park. Please give a round of applause for my new legislative aide, Sam Jackson. Stand up one more time so they can see you. Call that guy. Amy, you said call me? Call that guy. Call that guy. I wanted to also just recognize my chair. I know she was already recognized earlier, but my chair of Ways and Means, Delegate Ann Kaiser, who's here right now. I'm excited to be her partner in getting things done in education, in taxes and gaming, and ensuring that any elections. Before this, I was absolutely, I know Rebecca. Ain't that right, Rebecca? No, we're going to do some great work together this year, and I can't wait. I also want to just recognize, again, my friend, the mayor of Greenville, Colin Barrett, who's here, man. I remember knocking on this young man's door, and now he's the mayor. It's just so good to see. You know, we have so many young people getting involved in our electoral process, and it's just it's such a fresh breath of air to see young people like him getting involved and taking it to the highest level. So expect to see great things out of this young man as he moves on. You know, what I also want to talk about was Martin Luther King, the reason we're all here today. You know, this man fought for, he's not only one of my dear frat brothers in Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. Yeah, I'm gonna give an A5 to myself. That's all I get. I'm an 06 myself too, Nicole. Nicole's a Delta, you know, my man back there, I got one Alpha man back here. I love it. You know, he fought for, you know, social inclusion, economic inclusion, racial inclusion, and educational inclusion. And because of his work, we now have a record of 57 black legislators in the state of Maryland now. And that's a huge deal. 57. When I was here just 7 years ago, and I can't believe it's been 7 years, but just 7 years ago when I first started, it was about 28 to 30 of us here. Now we're at 57 in the state. Not only that, because of his work, we have 73 women legislators in the state of Maryland too. And I know you already heard that the speaker is the first black and first woman speaker, but that is resounding to hear. You know, resounding to hear, like that she is black, it's a woman who's leading. If you walk in that chambers, if you look around the door, the walls, you'll see former speakers on the walls, and all of them were white men. All of them. And we have a black woman. It's huge. It's huge. It's huge. Now, I say it to say we have a seat at the table now, right? We got a seat at the table to get some really good things done. You know, Coretta Scott King said, "I must remind you that starving a child is violence, suppressing a culture is violence, neglecting school children is violence, punishing a mother and her family is violence. Ghetto housing is violence. Ignoring medical need is violence. And contempt of poverty is violence." What we're doing this year is the most pivotal thing we can do for our state, and that's education. And I know you're hearing on the news about, oh, we need more money for education, we need more money, but this is the first time in a generation where we're really reforming education to the highest level and ensuring that kids in poverty. And Coretta Scott King said, if you're contempt of poverty, it's violence. It's violence that we are underfunding our school system at the rate we are. The county is underfunding our school system, and so is the state. We're all guilty of underfunding our school system. This year is the year to actually fully fund our education. And I know you might have heard on the news recently that the governor keeps saying that funding education is unaffordable. You might have heard it from someone else in this county too, that it's unaffordable to help pay for poor kids to learn at the highest level of their white counterparts in other counties. It's ridiculous to me. It's absolutely ridiculous. We need to do it. Let me tell you what we're doing in the Current Commission, just so there's no ambiguity here. We're talking about pre-K expansion. Anybody believe in universal pre-K? Okay. We're talking about teacher salary increases. Right now, teachers making $44,000 coming out of college. Because of this bill, we're going to give them up to $60,000 a year. You know those the shop classes and the mechanical classes, those career technical education courses that people say that we don't have enough of those in our schools. Because of this Current Commission recommendation, we're going to have more of those in our schools. More of those. More CTE programs in our schools. Absolutely. We're talking about community schools. Now I know you think of a community school and think it's just, you know, your neighborhood school that's right near you. No, we're talking about we're talking about a super community school, if that's the way you think about it. We're talking about actual wraparound resources in those schools. We're talking about mental and physical health, an actual therapist, a mental health therapist in the school. Let's talk about one of these schools. Absolutely, yeah. Let me bring it down to you so that we all really understand this. We're talking about Spring Hill Lake Elementary School, right? Anybody heard about Spring Hill Lake Elementary School? Okay, that's my neighborhood school. And so Spring Hill Lake Elementary School has about 80 to 85% poverty level. We're talking about they're gonna have a mental health professional there, a community schools coordinator in that school. They're gonna have extended day time at the school too. We're talking about wraparound resources, actually figuring out what the community needs are and providing those services there. We're talking about over 200, about $250 to $300,000 more just for that school, particularly Spring Hill Lake Elementary School, because we want to make sure currently gets passed. These are the things that we're fighting for here in Annapolis. And I can go on and go on. I can talk about affordable housing. I can talk about the racial injustice that's happening in our prisons. But right now, this is the year for education. This is the year of our students, of our families, of our children. This is what we need to do this year. And this is what we're going to get done with your help. So we need you to come to Annapolis again and help convince the governor, help convince the county that this is important, that this affects all of our kids. All of our kids. And one politician always says that these are our babies. These are our babies. These are our kids we're talking about here. This isn't Amazon and attracting Amazon. The governor wanted to give Amazon $8 billion in tax revenue to bring them here to our state. But he's not willing to put up $2.2 billion just so we can fund education and take care of our babies. How crazy is that to me? How crazy. This is our time that we stand up, and I hope that you all will join us in doing that. Thank you very much. Now I have the pleasure of introducing our guest speaker, Mr. Joe Pruden. Joe is heavily involved in the community and has done some incredible work in the district and beyond. Joe is a former vice president and chair of the NAACP Freedom Banquet and received the NAACP Image Award. He's a very active member of our community, including member of the Mayor's Education Advisory Committee for Berwyn Heights and College Park. He's a mentor for at-risk youth. He serves on the Superintendent's Advisory Council for both Prince George's County and the state of Maryland. He serves as the chair of the Board of Elections Supervisors for Cheverly. He is a Boy Scout leader and charter organization representative, along with many, many other distinctions. With that, please give a warm welcome for Mr. Joe Pruden.
Thank you very much for that. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm honored to be here, and I thank Senator Pinsky and the 22nd Legislative District for giving me this honor and allowing me to spend a few minutes with you. So, a senator calls you, and not the end of the world, but kind of a little bit of a surprise. And after you get on the phone, you go through the pleasantries. How are you? I'm fine. And how are you? Oh, I'm fine too. It's good. How things going? They're going well. How's Susan? Susan's fine. How's Joan? Joan's fine. It's fine. And now my brain is going, okay, let's go. But finally you get down to business. And the senator says, I would like for you to speak at our district meeting, our district open house in Annapolis at the state capitol on Martin Luther King Jr.'s day. Now your mind is already going, no way, no how, not me, ain't gonna happen. But while you're thinking that, your mouth went, it would be an honor, Senator. Where did that come from, It's too late now, but here I am. And I do appreciate the honor and the confidence you put in me, allowing me to have this microphone tonight. I told you that a little bit about why I'm here and how I got here, because I'm going to ask your forbearance tonight for two things. One is I'm not really sure which part of my brain showed up tonight, so who knows what'll happen. And the other is my notes might be out of order, so another surprise. We'll see what happens as we go along. Along the way, after a few other comments, I'm going to introduce you to my friend Larry. You'll hear more about Larry as we go on. 61st Avenue, where I grew up, was filled with husbands, fathers, men who were strong men to a man. They were hardworking, There were community leaders, and there were family men. So I had more examples of what a man is supposed to be and what a man can do than I could possibly explain if I took the next 2 hours. So I had a lot of really good male role models, and they contributed to what few accomplishments I've had immensely. But I've also had strong women in my life, very strong, focused, devoted to their families, capable, intelligent women. And more than anything else, they've kind of guided my footsteps along the path that I've taken. Because unlike the men, they are there constantly. They won't let you forget anything. They will let you know when, well, that's a good decision, but I would have. Had a lot of that. Many of you might remember my mother, Parthenia Pruden. If you do, you know that if you were in her presence, then you were influenced by her presence. My daughter changed my life just by coming into this world. Made everything different. My granddaughter is the same way, maybe a little bit more. But the most influential person in my life right now is my partner, my best friend, my wife of a long time, Susan Pruden. She keeps me centered. She puts up with all my shenanigans. She's stuck by me through a lot. Susan deserves, yes, it could. Susan deserves a Nobel Prize. Now, all of these women have kept hope alive in my heart. And that's kind of what I want to talk about tonight. That's hope. We've heard comments tonight about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We've heard the stories about him, and there will be more stories as time goes on. He influenced my life also. But all of that, I think, is encompassed by one word, and that is hope. We all have it. We all have a different definition of it. We all need it. We all survive by having hope. And so I'm going to take a few minutes and talk about it. But then there's my friend Larry. Larry and I were high school friends. We met in high school. The beginnings of our relationship weren't that spectacular. But his family moved into our neighborhood and we became very fast friends. My mom stopped saying Joseph and Larry, she just said the Boxy twins. And for you young people, ask the old ones, who are the Boxy twins? They'll tell you. Larry and I went to classes together. We played in the band together. We played outside in the world together. We rode our bicycles all over the countryside. We planned wild trips on our bicycles, and even sometimes made those trips happen. But more often than not, it was fun to plan and just go for a ride anyway. We received our draft notices on the same day. We were inducted into the Army on the same day. We rode the bus from Upper Marlboro to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, sitting side by side, and we went through basic together. So this is the young man who virtually held my hand as I was a teenager. I held his hand too. We grew up together. We had a bond that was insurmountable. And we experienced a lot of hope and disappointment together. So I can talk about him and some of the things we encountered and bring it back to my memory. I think the first hiccup along the way was when we were in high school. We took a trip to Williamsburg, class trip, on the bus. Most of the people in my class hadn't been out of Prince George's County, let alone the state of Maryland. So this was a big deal. Most of you in this room have probably been to Williamsburg more than once, but back then, hopping on the bus and going way down to Williamsburg, Virginia was a long trip and a lot of fun. We had a lot of anticipation for this. We went down, spent the day, we saw the things that we'd learned in history class, and we were exposed to the boats and the water and everything else down there. hopped on the bus and came back. Tired and sleepy, the sun had gone down, the bus pulled into a rest area in Northern Virginia along the highway. So of course we all disembarked, we went inside, we did all the things you do in a rest area. And this is before bottles of water or water bottles, but we all went to the water fountain. Whites only. We'd heard about these signs, we'd read about these signs, we'd never seen them. So you can imagine our consternation. It's dark, there really weren't a lot of people around, but this sign, this water fountain is whites only. After the program asked me how good it is to drink from a water fountain while you're looking at a sign that says whites only. There probably isn't a person on the bus who didn't do that. It's a different experience for us, but we took that back. But in spite of that experience, we still had hope. Let's move forward a little bit to the inauguration of President John F. Kennedy. We, Larry and me, went down to see the parade for his inauguration. We stood in the cold. We watched him walk by. And so now you can imagine our hope and our dreams and our futures way up here. Nothing's going to get in our way, nothing whatsoever. Add to that, just a couple years later, the March on Washington, in August 1963. Larry and I are getting ready to go back to school, and you could feel it in the community, especially among the men. There was a buzz, there was kind of a current going through. They're all putting on their shirts and ties. It was a hot day, so many of them just carried their jackets instead of wearing them. And many of them had short sleeve shirts. My father came to me and said, "Do you two want to go down with us to see Dr. Martin Luther King speak?" Predictably, what did we say? No. We had nothing planned that day, and school's coming up, so having days with nothing planned were at a premium. It was more important to stay home and do nothing. Well, I guess about an hour later, maybe less than that, I don't know how much time there was, we were sitting there doing nothing and talked and thought, you know, if all the men in our community decided to go see this, maybe this is something we should go see. Anything else to do, let's go. So we walked to the end of the bus line and we rode down and we went to the mall and we were there in time to hear the speeches, to see Dr. King. Now, he was a little dot way up there. But we did get to see him and hear him. And I'm ever grateful to whatever made us get up and go. Because we could have stayed at home and said, well, we saw it on television. But I can say I was there. And so can Larry. But then, we got to November. John F. Kennedy is no longer here. He's not our president anymore. We were in class in the afternoon. They announced it over the speaker. I remember it was math class. And Larry and I were sitting by our then girlfriends. And so all the young ladies are hugging the young men. And it occurred to me later on that this is, that sometimes there are events of more import than hugging your girlfriend in class in front of the teacher without being reprimanded. This was a totally different event, and aside from that little piece of my life, the whole day, the whole year, it was startling to all of us. Again, Larry and I decided to go down. We had been there when the president was inaugurated, and we thought we'd go down to the Capitol. We didn't go into the Capitol, but we stood vigil outside until after the caisson went by. So now our hopes are down just a little bit, but not gone. They're never gone. They're always hovering there. We're always hopeful. We know no matter what happens, there's tomorrow. The next year, Civil Rights Act. Wow, the Civil Rights Act. We didn't even really know what it meant. But Civil Rights Act, freedom, let's go out and register voters. We did all of that. We're happy-go-lucky, things are gonna get better. And because we believed they were going to get better, I think they did get better. Whether they did or not, they got better. Then after that, Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. That really hit us because we had been down there, we had seen him, we'd been through the Civil Rights Act, we'd been through voter registration, and we thought things are really going to get better. Why did they do that? We heard it on the news. Larry was working at a Safeway. Neither one of us had our own vehicles. We're still teenagers. But I heard about what was going on in DC and asked my parents if I could use their car to pick Larry up from work and bring him home. So I went there. He's still ringing up groceries, so I'm bagging groceries for him. He got off work, so we hopped in the car, and we could see the smoke coming up from our Washington, D.C. And we pulled over and just got out of the car and stood there. What do? We can't go put the fires out. We can't stop the rioting. We can't do anything except get my parents' car back home and therefore get us back home so we're safe and be vigilant. But that was very frustrating because we wanted to go do something. And fortunately, the impetus of getting my parents' car back home overrode the impetus of going downtown and trying to do something, which would have just added to the turmoil. So we kind of overcame that, and then we lost Bobby Kennedy. One more blow. After all these good things that happened in our life. Now, my purpose tonight is not to give you a history lesson. I'm telling you this because for a lot of reasons, but among them are, this was a slice of Larry and my life. This was our teen years until we were in our very early 20s. One blow after another blow after another blow, interspersed with a lot of good happiness. And in spite of all of that, and because of our parents who instilled us with a great deal of hopefulness, we didn't go down the tubes as we might have. There were millions of people, a whole generation who went through those same few years that we did. The time I just described to you was only about 6 years, maybe 7. We're not the only ones. But when I talk to people of my age and we talk about those 3 years, we pretty much had the same experience. And no matter where we lived in the country, no matter who our parents were, no matter what our economic status, we all had that same roller coaster ride in those few years. So I'm here and hopeful because of my parents, because of my community, my siblings, my spouse, my aunts and uncles, my family. We have a very good, close-knit family, large family. I love every one of them as a group and individually, but when I say my family, I include our neighbors. We grew up as a cluster there, one big unit. So, because of my parents, I will always be hopeful. If you go back to pick any of those dates I mentioned and move forward to now, have we made progress? Sure. Sure we made progress. Have we made enough progress? No. Have we made as much as we could have? No. Or should have? No. But we have made progress, and I choose to focus on the things that we have accomplished and the things that I can do rather than those things that might drag me down and make me hopeless. So, I challenge you in this room to do as my parents did and instill into your children and to the youth over whom you have influence a sense of hopelessness. I'm sorry. Okay, wrong page. A sense of hopefulness. Being hopeful doesn't have to be irrational. It can be rational. Progress is not always going to be linear. There are going to be ups and downs. But if we stay well planted on the ground, we stay hopeful, then the next thing that smacks us in the face, we have a chance of overcoming. Without it, we're just going to sit and do nothing. So I challenge you to inspire the youth around you, the children around you, to be hopeful, to be positive, just like my parents did with me, and I believe Larry and I did with our children. Thank you very much for your time and attention.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Pruden, for those really hopeful words. We really appreciate it. It definitely gives us an opportunity to reflect on this MLK commemorated Monday. First order of business. For those who don't know, I'm sorry, I'm Delegate Nicole Williams. So I'm the newbie here to the District 22 team, but I'm really grateful to be a part of this wonderful team. I do want to acknowledge a couple of elected officials that came in the room after we did our earlier acknowledgements. First, Delegate Diane Fennell was here. I don't know if she's still here. Also, Delegate Julian Ivey. Back there in the back, thank you, Julian, for stopping by. Delegate Ben Barnes. Is Delegate Barnes still here? Okay, I see Senator Joanne Benson for District 24. I also saw Danny Scheibel, council member from the city of Hyattsville, walk in. And I also see Ms. Teresa Dudley, who's the president of the Prince George's County Educators Association, a member of our Central Committee. Okay, so as I mentioned, I'm the newbie delegate here. I just was sworn in back on October the 6th, and so I'm just really grateful to be here. I finally got an office. I'm in room 209 across the street, so stop on by. I have an amazing staff that's here to serve you, and so if they can stand up, Deja Williams, who is my legislative aide chief of staff, she's back in the back. Wave your hand, Deja, so people know who to call. All right. And also Morgan Mills, who's an intern with my office. She's a student at UMBC. And so we have an amazing team here that's here to work for you. And so I just wanted to just kind of end the evening. Thank you so much for talking about the, going to see Dr. King at the march there. One of the things I try to do around this time is either read something or download something related to Dr. King. So the most recent thing that I downloaded recently was actually his last book that Dr. King wrote back in 1967 titled, "Where Do We Go From Here?" And if you haven't had a chance to read it, I really encourage you to read it. It was written a year before he died. And one of the things that he talked about in that book actually was the signing of the civil rights legislation and just how wonderful everyone felt at that time. But then looking back afterwards, then the question became, where do we go from here? We had this wonderful legislation that just was enacted and everyone felt hopeful. And he discussed in the book the passing of it, but then he later also discussed, talking about Brown versus Board of Education, and then, like I said, the legislation that followed subsequently, the failed implementation of that legislation. And he talked about the need for further implementation. Now that we have this legislation, the implementation of equality in the workplace and equality in housing, but also equality in education. And I know education is a huge theme that you've heard over and over and over again. But one of the things, that Dr. King wrote and that talked about in that book was just whether or not we're willing as a society. Actually, the direct quote was, there's a great majority of Americans who are suspended between two opposing attitudes. They are uneasy with injustice, but sometimes unwilling yet to pay a significant price to eradicate it. And as we talk about, the blueprint for Maryland's future, which is the bill here that we are going to be examining this legislative session here in Annapolis, and we talk about the funding formulas for our children and how we're going to educate our children better and pay our teachers what they deserve and actually bring our children up starting by the time they're 3 years old. The question that we have to ask ourselves when we talk about the injustice in our school system is, are we willing to pay for it? Are we willing to take the tough road to eradicate the injustices that we see? And so that's what Dr. King talks about in his last book. And so I really encourage you to read it there. We're working very hard here in Annapolis, as Delegate Healey mentioned. There's a lot of other legislation that we're going to be working on. I have the privilege of being assigned to the Judiciary Committee. I know we had some members from Greenbelt that came to our hearing just last Wednesday, where we heard HB 4, which is the long arm gun statute, to close the loopholes as it relates to the private sales and sales at gun shows of shotguns and rifles, requiring background checks for individuals engaged in those purposes and purchases. And so, I am excited to be here in Annapolis. My door is an open door policy. I'm in room 209. And so I just ask that, if you're ever around, please stop on by. Please do not hesitate to call myself or Deja or Morgan with anything that you might need. We're here for you. Without you, we wouldn't be here. And so we ask that you do please continue to contact us. Go to the website. You'll see the various bills that I'm working on and co-sponsoring with some of my colleagues here this session. I'm just super excited that you all were able to brave the cold weather to come down here this evening. I know it wasn't easy, and so I just really want to thank you so much. And also thank our fearless leader, Senator Pinsky, who I am now going to introduce, and he's going to close us out with a couple of remarks, but also just want to be thankful to him for getting us all together this evening as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. We have a great team. All three of them, yes, absolutely, give a hand. Alonzo and Nicole, they do terrific work. And my personal team, Ian Ullman, who's been with me many, many years. And we have a new addition, Susan Kiviola. Where's Susan in the back? She's another one who, community relations, you have a concern or problem, check with Susan. And we have two interns, Sydney and Eleanor, also in the back from the University of Maryland, who are joining us this session. I do want to thank one other person before I get into my remarks. Yes. Some people say, Paul, you're boring. You do the same thing year after year. One thing we do and try to do well is to feed you. And we always go to the old reliable, Mario Rapola, who owns three brothers in the back. I have to tell you, besides being a brave businessman, he's brave personally, and I can attest to that from my heart. He cares about the community, and he is a person who continues to give back and care about others. Thank you, my brother. Thank you. The historian John Meacham called Dr. King a practical idealist. A practical idealist. Dr. King believed that the March on Washington in '63, which Joe talked about, was not an end but a beginning to the struggle for civil rights. So in that light, let me share a little idealism and a real, what I guess I call, real politic of 2020, which might not be so inspiring, but at the end we're still going to get back to the point of hope. It's hard to talk about the state of Maryland, the state of our district, separate from mentioning national politics. Now, I'm sure I could spend hours and hours. You don't want to hear it. You've read about it. You watch it on TV. But on the national scene, it's an embarrassment. We know Donald Trump is a demagogue. We know he's deceitful. We know he wouldn't know the truth if it smacked him in the face. And he's a bully who stokes racism and anti-immigration attitudes. It's true. It's not going to wait until he goes away. So that's something we have to work on over the next 10 months. He lacks a moral center. We know that. You know, President Harry Truman, 70 years ago or whatever, he said you have to appeal to people's best interests, not their worst ones. You may win an election or so by appealing to their worst ones, but it does a lot of harm to our country. That was said 70 years ago. It's truer today than ever. But hopefully in 10 or 11 months he'll be gone, and we can stand here and castigate him for hours and hours. But depending on the poll, there are 40 or 41% of the public that embraces him, loves his direction. And that is indeed scary. So when he's gone, we have a major concern. How can it be? I mean, how can that be in our country after we had President Barack Obama for 8 years? I mean, it's like a disconnect. Obviously, and Joe and I didn't compare notes, our approach has to be one of hope. I agree wholeheartedly, and not of fear. It has to be about bringing people together for the collective good. And that's the opposite of what we're hearing from a large part of Washington. So we still have a challenge, and hopefully next year we can celebrate with a new progressive president. But let me move on. I don't want to bore you with that. You'll have plenty of time to watch TV and catch up on that. Our governor, our chief executive, is not Donald Trump. He is not Donald Trump. He isn't obnoxious. He's not over the top. But when you compare anybody to Donald Trump, it's a pretty low bar. There's some pretty despicable people who might even show better than Donald Trump, so that shouldn't be the bar we use. You know, whether it's a governor or whether it's any of your representatives in the 22nd District or any elected official, any of us, all of us, should be judged on where we stand on the issues. You know, personalities tell a lot, sure, and he is obnoxious. But the content of someone's character clearly comes out on the positions and the politics they stand for and they defend. Is the leader part of the solution or part of the problem? But there's also a third choice. And we need to understand that if an elected official is silent in the face of that problem, they become part of the problem. That's right. Silence, sitting back, is not an answer. And they objectively are on the same side as the people creating the problem, and we have to remember that. You know, I and the legislature, my colleagues here in the room today, we're working hard to address a number of issues. Climate change. We see the storms, we see the fires, we see the sea level rise, we see the flooding. We're trying to address that. We're trying to address school reform, this Kirwan Commission, and many other issues. Unfortunately, the Hogan administration is dragging their feet and giving lip service to these and making like they care about it, but not doing anything. And in fact, they're actively opposing it. You know, and Alonzo very, very carefully talked about what this Kirwan Commission does. We're not talking about throwing some money at a little problem. That's happened already. This is a plan 3 years in the making. We studied what works the best around the country and around the world and gets results for children of all economic backgrounds. And this is a plan, as was said, to provide pre-kindergarten for 3- and 4-year-olds for people who can't afford it, to make sure there's not a learning gap between the middle class and people in poverty, to begin to attract people into teaching. Maybe instead of being a doctor or a lawyer or a judge or a CEO, we can get these great, smart people in front of our children. But we have to make some major changes. We have to make it more difficult to become a teacher. We have to pay them better, like architects and accountants and nurses, and improve their working conditions. We have to have a more challenging curriculum, and as Alonzo said, we have to have career technology. Some people are longtime Prince George's residents. We had high schools like the old Bladensburg High School in the 60s that had shops galore and people had guaranteed jobs. We should have opportunities for children either to go to college or to be well trained and get high paying jobs. We have to do that. That all went to seed. We've got to make a radical transformation to have opportunities for our children. And for those coming a number of steps behind, we have to have tutoring, we have to have health care, and one of the examples Alonzo mentioned, you know, in many of our schools, there is an aide and a cot. That's not enough. We need nurses. We need nurse practitioners, physician assistants who actually treat these children, get them better so they can learn. And that's what this proposal does. And finally, it also includes accountability. We're not talking about just sending money. We're going to hold school systems and schools accountable to make this transformation so every student, African American, Latinx, Asian, people of European descent, have an opportunity that they might not have had before. To make it world class, to be successful, to have the opportunity. That's what this program we're trying to implement does. Now, it's amazing in 2020 that the governor says, it's a bad idea, I don't want to pay for it. Not only that, he had a fundraiser last fall where he raised money from donors to use to stop this Kerwin reform. I mean, he was actually raising money to try to block it. And not only that, he did it where the money was untraceable.
That's right.
Which currently is legal. It should not be allowed to happen, and we're going to pass some legislation to try to stop that. But again, in 2020, and we think of Dr. King, he would be here saying that having education for our children is a civil right, and no one should stand in the way of it. And we're going to keep pushing, and we're going to keep pushing until we get the thing done, I can tell you that much. A couple of other items, and it was referred to earlier. We have the policy, but nothing is free. So we're going to have to raise revenue to pay for this school effort. Now, this year we're going to try to do some things I've been fighting for years of closing corporate loopholes and raise tax on cigarettes and this vaping, which has become horrible to our children and dangerous. We're going to tax social media. So we're going to try to do things that don't hurt working and poor folk to pay for this. And while we want to tax the very super wealthy, the multimillionaires and billionaires, we all might have to kick in a little bit. Just like our grandparents paid taxes for their parents and our parents paid taxes for us, it is paying it forward. And this is going to be a shared responsibility between the state and the county government. The state is going to give 70% of this new additional money, and it's slated for the counties to give 30%. Now, we're going to try to do it in the most progressive way possible, but we're all going to have to kick in. Because in the end, if we have a truly literate, educated, and trained society, we're going to have a better society. And we're actually going to have more income tax because of it. They're going to make more money, be better trained, and be high quality. So when you go to the doctor's office and that nurse is sticking you with a syringe, you know they were trained well. Or if your child goes to a school, their teacher is an outstanding teacher, whether they're Morgan State or Maryland or Harvard, whatever. But it's going to take a commitment. And I hope you were there with us in following through on that commitment. And again, schools are one thing. You've heard a lot about schools. There are other areas we have to struggle to achieve. Affordable, quality health care for everyone. It should be a right and not a privilege, and I'm going to keep saying that until there's health care for everybody. We have to reduce gun violence, get guns off the street. There's too much gun, we're losing too many children. It's got to stop. We got stronger gun laws, and we got to prosecute those people who are bringing those guns in from other states. And finally, we have to create meaningful, good jobs that pay well, and that contribute to that quality of life that Dr. King himself pleaded for, marched for, and gave his life for. We must keep hope alive. You know, that's what Jesse Jackson said many years ago, and it's particularly true on this Martin Luther King Day. It is our responsibility, and indeed, it is our duty. Thank you. Thank you. And I want to add a final comment. I come to you today with a heavy heart. You may have noticed that my partner, my wife, my rock, Joan Rothgeb, who's been here for the 15 or 16 years, is not with us tonight. She's at home. She's fighting cancer. She was diagnosed last spring with pancreatic cancer. But she's fighting, and she's a fighter, and she's valiant. And her thoughts are in my heart, but she's always here, and she's the one who is much more social than I am, and gotten to know you many times over the years for this event. So I miss her, and I hope you keep her thoughts and prayers in your heart as well. Okay. At this point, to close the event, to remember Dr. King and the importance of the holiday, we end with Lift Every Voice. So our friend is not with us today. He usually leads that, and I have a terrible voice, so if anybody wants to get us started, we have the words, they're on the table, they're here, so if everyone, please stand up.
My voice is pretty bad too. Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven. Oh wait. Oh, hold on.
We got the words on the
One more time. Rise high as the listening skies. Let every sound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of a new day begun, let us march on till victory is won.
Thank you all. Thank Joseph Pruden for his presentation tonight. And please have a safe trip home. Those who want to stay, we welcome you into the gallery in the House of the Senate across the street. Thank you very much.
One more thing, if you don't mind. I did make one big mistake. I didn't introduce my husband, who's here, Neil Conway, the love of my life, a husband of 41 years, and I thank him for being here too. Thank you.